Food security, grow your own and dig for victory. This is your VE Day special with me, Farmers Guardian's online editor, Emily Ashworth. This year marks 80 years since the end of the war, and Farmers Guardian thought it would be interesting to look back at a time when farming was firmly in the spotlight, especially given everything that's going on currently. Food security is once again back in the limelight. So, World War II. It began in 1939 and pretty quickly food was at the forefront of the government's plans. This statistic always shocks me, but before the war we imported around 70% of our food, and this was the biggest chink in our armour. The government set up war agricultural committees, or you may have heard them called just war ag committees, and they were established in World War I previously, specifically to drive food production and look at how the country could maximise agricultural production. These were made up of influential people across various areas, and they kind of pulled the strings and led farmers to produce food in a certain way. German blockades were stopping imports getting to our country's ports, and we needed a solution pretty fast. Rationing was then introduced in 1940, and farming suddenly became more important than ever. And even though farming was a reserved occupation, which meant if you were a farmer you didn't have to go off to war, you could work the land, many who did work on Britain's farms went off to help the war effort, and it meant we needed an agricultural workforce. So this is where we see the rebirth of the Women's Land Army, or as many call them, Land Girls. The Women's Land Army was set up in World War I, but it was now time to up the ante and create a solid labour force across the country. Overall, over 200,000 women were Land Girls, and they helped turn food security on its head. That number quoted before, that 70% of imports, was almost all reversed. During this time, the aim was to produce as much food as possible, but there was a real focus on potatoes and wheat. Some farmers had to give their land over to the government, even if it wasn't the right conditions for growing potatoes. Other land was reclaimed. Land that was previously deemed unsuitable for producing food was put back into production. We're talking millions of acres of grassland and pasture that was brought under cultivation. The staple diet during World War II was bread and potatoes, and between 1939 and 1945 we saw a production increase of 74.3% for potatoes and 90.8% for wheat. People of Britain were also encouraged to do their bit. Grow your own is one of the most famous pieces of propaganda from that wartime era, and if you had the space, many kept their own pigs and used them for their own meat. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler died, and a week later, on May the 8th, victory was announced, and it is now forever known as VE Day. Post-war is where it gets interesting. After the war, the UK implemented food subsidies as part of its post-war agricultural policy to ensure food security and self-sufficiency. The 1947 Agriculture Act was established, meaning guaranteed prices for most farm products, and provided deficiency payments where the government made up the difference between the guaranteed price and the market price. It meant affordable food for the people of Britain and ensured farmers were paid. Farming became more intensified. A country that felt the weight of possible starvation was not about to let this happen again. But after 80 years of policy changes and supermarket price wars, where the price of food has been driven lower and lower, we are now at a point again where food security is back in the spotlight as British farmers navigate the new Labour government's changes to inheritance tax, environmental subsidies and a possible trade deal with America. I hope you enjoyed this VE Day special, and it certainly gives us something to think about.